There's a little-known part of Hollywood that most people are not aware of, known as the Audience Test Preview. The book, Audienceology, reveals this for the first time. Our podcast series, Don't Kill the Messenger, brings this book to life, taking a peek behind the curtain. And now, join author and entertainment research expert, Kevin Goetz.
Receiving feedback can be tough, especially in a creative field. I mean, it's easy to mistake it for criticism, but learning to embrace it and knowing what truly matters helps filmmakers grow. This is just one of the lessons that my guest today learned early in his career. As the son of a very famous television actor, Chris Landon grew up in the entertainment industry, but built his career on his own, first as a writer, then as a director and producer. Through the years, Chris has made a name for himself mostly in the horror genre, especially in horror comedy. His films include Happy Death Day 2 You, Freaky, Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, and We Have a Ghost. Chris, I've had the pleasure of working with you, I think, through most of your audience test screenings, and I am so thrilled for this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you. I am delighted and shocked.
And what?
And shocked to be here.
Shocked.
I don't know. I was like looking at all of your podcasts and I was like, oh my God, Elizabeth Gabler. Like you've got like
I've got some good
on this
ones.
show. And I was like, why is he calling me?
Well, I tell you a bunch of reasons, and mostly because you've been on a really great run of successful movies. You had one that came out just a few weeks ago called Hard Eyes, which we worked on together. And I was really struck with the sort of the style of that movie. I thought it was so well done and it had a real voice to it. And I have watched you now, I think, since Disturbia, and you were a writer, you didn't direct that, really come into your own film language. And I think it's great. And I'm really proud of you and excited that we've had that opportunity to sort of work together.
Yeah. I mean, you're like the only person I want to see in that theater. That's the truth.
Let's go back, which I like to do often, to a young Christopher. Were you born as Christopher?
My mom tried to have me born as a Christian, but my Jewish father did not want a son named Christian.
Michael was...
My dad was Jewish, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow.
He was Jewish.
And your mother was a rather devout Christian, if I'm not
She
mistaken.
became one post-divorce.
And that has something to do with also your sexuality, if I recall reading correctly, which is you and I are both gay men, and we came out probably at similar times in that sort of college-y time.
Yeah, that's right.
A little after.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she wasn't your staunchest supporter.
Not at all.
So what was that like? Because I know your parents divorced also, right?
Yeah. I mean, my parents divorced when I was very young. I think they separated when I was about 5 and had one of those very like messy Hollywood divorces that took forever.
But you're the youngest of 4 children from the same parents. But
yes.
Then you have a very big sort of Brady Bunch family. Yeah.
Huge family. But yeah, coming out, my mom, it's funny, she was not a religious person. In fact, she kind of post-separation and divorce, I called it like her Debbie Harry phase. She was wild and crazy. And then one day, I remember distinctly, she did not come home at dinner time. And she was in town, so we were expecting to have dinner with her. And she didn't show. And then she finally rolled in hours later, and she had found God. She was a born-again Christian because she had gone to get her nails done.
Oh, my God.
And she unloaded on this manicurist. And the manicurist was like, you need Jesus now, and took her straight to church. And my mom came home a born-again Christian and never looked back.
Wow.
And it made our heads spin.
You must have been, what, 10?
By then, yeah, I was probably about 10 years old. And my sister and I both, because we were really the only kids at home at that point.
Because there was separation.
So my older siblings were like out college age. And so the two of us were like, what the fuck is happening? Like, who is this person? And it was something that we had to sort of adapt to.
Where was your dad during this time?
He was around. We lived with my dad on the weekends. And my dad obviously found out about all of this and had his opinions about it, but also knew better and stayed out of her personal
Was he
life.
remarried by that time?
He was remarried by then, yeah.
So what was it like growing up with having such a famous father, Michael Landon of Little House on the Prairie fame and other shows as well? He truly was a legendary actor, mostly in television. Tell me about that.
I mean, look, there was sort of the private life that to us felt very normal because it's all you know when you're sort of born into that situation. And most of our time, we lived a fairly, I would say, sheltered or insulated life. And it's very different now too, because back then we didn't have social media. And I just feel like celebrity was a different thing. I think celebrity could be a more private thing back then.
Yeah, well, people protected you. And there wasn't social media. So
so
people
that's
didn't know what
mean.
you were up to. It was more mysterious.
Yeah,
right?
there was more mysterious in the, even at a young age, there was paparazzi, but it wasn't as aggressive as it has become over the years.
Sure.
And yeah, we just kind of had relatively normal lives in terms of hanging out and just doing normal stuff. But the difference being when we went out, it changed. That's when you became painfully aware of how different things were for us. And to be honest, I didn't like it.
Sure.
I didn't love it.
How was he with your sexuality?
I didn't have the chance to come out to him. So he passed away when I was 16.
Of pancreatic
cancer.
God, I remember that. It was a big, and he was young.
He was very young and it was very fast because he was diagnosed in April and he died in July.
Did he tell all your kids right away?
He told us right away. He had been sick for a while, but he was one of those people, this is a good segue, one of those people who refused to go to a doctor. Hated doctors.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, the pancreatic is the hardest one to beat, but he had warning signals a year before his diagnosis. But he was a workaholic and he kept putting it off. And then he started making excuses and thinking like he was diagnosing himself, like it's ulcers.
And what about
like
your
that.
stepmom? Was she being insistent or not?
I think she was trying as best
when someone has their mind made up.
But yeah, I mean, my dad was a hard person to move in one direction or another.
Sure.
He was very opinionated and very stubborn in his ways. And so, yeah, by the time he actually went to a doctor because the pain was so great, it was too late.
And you are a cancer survivor.
I am, yeah.
But unlike your dad.
I went to the doctor. I'll say the story because this is really important, I think. Thank
you, by the way, for sharing this because I usually don't go so early in the show.
Let's get deep into it. Let's go straight to cancer. It's so fun.
In fact, you had kidney cancer. I understand it to be a somewhat rare cancer. And I was just telling you before we went on air that I had 3 friends that have been diagnosed within the last, 3 years. And I just find that so crazy.
Yeah. And what's scary about kidney cancer is that they call it a silent killer. Because often
hard to detect.
It's hard to detect. And also, by the time you feel symptoms, it's usually because it has spread. So it's a tricky one for your...
How did it present itself?
I got very lucky. So I was about to go shoot We Have a Ghost for Netflix. And I was about to leave and head to New...
Which was so much fun, by the way.
Thank you. And I was about to head to New Orleans. And I was having lunch with my friend Robert Horn. And... he had just come from his doctor and I was like, oh my God, I haven't had a physical in over a decade. I literally just had that thought and I went, I should go get a physical just because. And so he gave me his doctor's info. I went, did the thing. Everything was fine. They did blood work. And then I went to New Orleans. I get a call from him in New Orleans and he says, hey, you have elevated liver enzymes. Now I had my gallbladder removed. And sometimes when you don't have a gallbladder, it spikes that number. So I just told him, don't worry about it. This is normal for me. I'm fine. And this doctor was insistent. He was like, you are going. I found a place for you to go in New Orleans. It'll take you 5 seconds to go in there and do it. And so I popped in and had some tests done. And then I was in my hotel room in New Orleans and I got an email from the hospital and I opened the email and it was like, you have kidney cancer.
Oh my God.
So my liver was fine. I was right.
Had you started shooting yet?
Not yet.
Because now you're in a different headspace.
I am deep into prep.
And you know you have to be there for your whole cast.
And this is like the first big budget movie that I've ever made. And so there's just an enormous amount of responsibility, so much weight on this.
Who did you first tell?
It was hard because it was like 6 a.m. in New Orleans and my husband was back in LA. So I text him first.
Cody, call out to
Cody. Yeah. So my husband, Cody. So I text him first and then he was the only person I wanted to talk to.
Absolutely.
And I didn't want to panic anybody else or scare anybody else. But the problem was it was 4 a.m. for him. So I had like a solid 2-hour period where I could just go down that awful Google rabbit hole of like, am I going to die? What is this? Anyways,
Mr. Horn saved your life.
Mr. Horn did save my life. Also, amazing talent. So what's funny is that like I immediately went into director mode and was like, I'm taking care of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And within less than 2 weeks, it was out.
Incredible.
I'd had surgery and had a partial nephrectomy, which is when they remove part of your kidney.
And you're a survivor.
Yeah, knock on wood. But here's the thing.
Isn't that great?
I got very lucky, and most people don't. And so this is why now I go around preaching the gospel of vigilance.
It's incredible.
Because
it's so cool of you to do.
Because you don't know.
You bet.
And so you've got to go and you've got to check your body. You've got to do it. Even when you think everything is fine. I work out 5 times a week. I'm not a drinker. I'm not a smoker.
I thought because your father had it, that would also present in some weird way an awareness,
You would think, but it didn't. Because I also had this idea in my head that like I live healthier, and also I really had convinced myself that I was sort of physically and genetically taking after my mother, and everyone on her side of the family lives forever. And everyone on my father's side of the family, all the men die young.
You're probably destined to live forever.
I hope so. No, I don't want to. But anyways, this is what I do. I do tell people all the time, please go and just get physicals, get your blood work done.
Absolutely.
If you can go get
beautiful
tested,
message.
Just do it.
Beautiful message.
It takes
Not
no
only are
time
you
at all.
moving people with your movies, but you're moving people with your own personal story. I want to move to Loyola Marymount. You had a love for film growing up. Not a surprise. You've shared it in a number of interviews. I understand that you snuck in your parents' bedroom and watched Psycho when you were like a little boy and freaked out at the shower scene.
Yep.
But that had to inform you.
It definitely sort of lit a fuse.
When did you decide consciously, I want to go into the film business?
I don't know if it was like a conscious light bulb moment for me.
Well, you decided to go to film school.
I did. I was obsessed my whole life with movies, specifically horror films. And again, this was sort of a combo, which I would say growing up in the industry, being on set with my dad had a huge impact on me. Not because my tastes were specifically aligned with what he did. I was interested in a very different thing, but he was so happy and fulfilled at work. And that was a really cool thing to grow up around.
And he directed and produced.
Yeah, and wrote.
Incredible.
And so it just had such a huge impact on me to watch one of your parents love their work. I think it's really powerful. And then as another byproduct of my parents' divorce was that my dad kind of like, I don't know, he like wanted to be the cool dad and the no rules dad because he had us on the weekends. And I think he wanted to win the cool parent game. And so he made my mom be the heavy. I kind of, at a young age, just sort of got dropped down a well of darkness, right? In terms of watching stuff that was wildly inappropriate for me to watch. But my dad, he just started letting my sister and I rent. This is back in the day when we had video stores. He let us just rent what we wanted. There were very few off the table movies. I can remember like 2 of them that he said, you can't watch that. Otherwise, we just watched everything. And it was all like, this was the 80s and like the heyday of really graphic,
you think he wanted to be a cool dad?
Yeah.
Or did he want to just really expose you to culture and to all sorts of things?
I mean, it was a pretty narrow field of exposure because it was all horror. He loved horror movies, by the way.
He did.
He did. So he watched a lot of them with us.
But you're a mashup guy.
I am a mashup guy.
How did you become that?
So again, at an early age, I was very interested in movies in general. And I remember seeing, I don't remember how old I was, but I saw Terms of Endearment.
They had to pick me up off the floor on that one.
And I saw that movie.
Somebody help my daughter
the shot.
Yeah.
And so I saw that movie, and then for a whole summer, and I'm like, I don't know, 8, 9, I would watch that movie every single day while I was sitting in front of the TV building Legos, and I was obsessed with it. I cried. I was so into it. I loved how emotional it was, how funny it was, how real everybody felt in it. And so that was sort of this weird balance of stuff that I was into.
Very interesting, because Jim Brooks, I'm working with him now on yet another one of his He's such a genius.
He's a genius.
But the guy knows how to do exactly what you're talking about. Take us to the edge of almost like absurdity within the drama and find the funny in it.
Yeah.
And that's a unique skill. And you did that. Listen, Happy Death Day, I mean, some people could write it off as just a horror movie, but the comedy in that and the irreverence, and then in the second one, is phenomenal.
Thanks. Like I said, for me, it's like if I have a brand, and it's interesting because someone said this to me, oh, you make feel-good horror. And I thought that was really funny because they don't really necessarily belong together.
No, I can understand why they would say that. And I want to ask you about when you were in Loyola, you did get a big break within school. In fact, you decided to leave school.
Yeah.
And
much to my mother's chagrin.
Well,
yeah.
I'm sure. So you had the good fortune of having a success at 20-ish years old. And then things didn't work out as well for you.
No, they went to the shitter.
And you moved to Texas, didn't you?
I did. I moved to Texas.
What were you hoping to find there? Give it up?
Myself, I think. I was giving up. But at that point, I'd been dropped by my agency. So I'm in college. I make a short film. It gets seen by the right person. I find myself with this very sudden and kind of surprising and really bizarre gig because these producers approached me and they said, we have this book
called
Another Day in Paradise, and Larry Clark, the director, is attached.
He's an interesting filmmaker.
Super interesting guy. And a lot of his work is pretty astounding. But at the time, I'm 19. And they say, we don't have any money to pay you. And we only have half the book. So here's the offer. You write half the script. And if we like it, we'll make a deal. And we'll figure out how to get you paid. And if we don't like it, tough shit, move on.
You can say that to a 19-year-old.
Absolutely.
Who never has no
to me,
credits.
I was like, this is amazing. Exactly. It was a dream come true. So I was like, absolutely. And so I just made sure that those first 60 pages were the best pages I've ever written at that time, which was not a lot of time. And so they were happy. They officially hired me. They made a deal. And then the crazy part was the book was written by a guy named Eddie Little. And apparently the first half of the book he wrote high. He was a heroin addict.
Oh.
Yeah.
High.
And so a lot of it was presented as fiction, but it was very autobiographical. And there's some dark shit in this book, some scary shit. And then the second half of the book he was writing from prison. And so I'm waiting for the second half of the book to arrive. And the second half arrives and I can't use it. It's so strange. Like
because it was so dark or because
no,
it didn't make sense?
It just went off in a whole different direction. It didn't connect to the other part. So then the producers are like, well, we can't use this. So now you're going to have to make the rest up. And then I'm thinking, if this guy gets out of prison, he's going to fucking kill me. He's going to find me and murder me. So I'm terrified writing the second half. But anyways, it all
Did you ever get his blessing, by the way?
No, I did not. He sadly passed away. He passed away a few days after he was released from prison.
Oh, boy.
He went right out and OD'd.
And he OD'd.
He did.
The success of that, again, as so many things in this business, is fleeting.
It was fleeting. And so there was that moment where everyone was like,
I don't need school.
Who's this 19-year-old who just wrote a movie? And I did. And I suddenly was like getting all these job offers. And I took a couple of them right away. And then I quit school because I told my mom, I'm like, I've made it.
Is that a regret looking back?
It's not. I don't regret.
Good.
I'm not a regretter.
Good.
Because everything has happened for a reason.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
So
What if your kids come to you in their sophomore year and say, Dad, I'm leaving. You going to be okay with it?
I'll be okay with it.
Good.
That's their life.
I think I'd go a little nuts first and then, I've had this debate with friends of ours. And the reason for me is not because I'm so much about college, although I really think it's important for your development.
Absolutely.
But in the company that I own, we have a blind hiring process. So we don't look at names.
Right.
Because when the DEI initiatives came in,
right,
we decided we're going to really not be influenced for different jobs and different people's backgrounds or names. So we took it off, but what we had to do is come up with some criteria. The first, of course, was a single typo or grammar error on the resume got you in the garbage. We're a research company.
Yeah.
It's like, no way.
Totally.
We're detail-oriented. If you can't close the parenthesis, for example.
Right.
The second was college. If you didn't go to college, you were in the garbage can. Now, I could miss some real talent, but how else are you going to do it? You've got to have criteria.
Right.
Then, of course, it was the major. And, of course, after that, not necessarily after that, was the school itself. Where did they go? So all of those things have meaning in the profession that I'm in.
Yeah.
And for good reason, you're competing against other people. And I think it speaks to completing something.
Right.
So I've asked that question of a bunch of folks, and many have left school, had gone back at some point, even just to say, I finished the friggin' thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, it felt like a way station. I was just kind of hanging out, waiting to do what I wanted to do. Because, I started making short films with my friends in high school.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So I was already...
Mom or dad give you a camera?
Yep. Dad gave me a camera, and
You asked for it?
I did.
You did ask
Yeah, I wanted it.
Any of your other siblings in the business, by the way?
A bunch. Or I shouldn't say a bunch, but there's a few.
Well, I mean, how many total do you have?
So there are 8 of us total, with the sort of halves and the steps sort of all together. In the business, I have my older brother, Mike, is a writer, director, producer as well. And then my younger sister, Jennifer Landon, is an actress, and she's on Yellowstone, and she's awesome.
Are you close with the whole bunch?
I am. Yeah. We're a really tight-knit family.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
And holidays, you'd get together?
Oh, yeah. Every holiday.
Where do you live?
I live in Santa Barbara.
You love it up there?
I love it. It's beautiful.
Did you want to leave LA for any particular reason? Was it for the kids?
It was for the kids. It was definitely for the kids. My husband and I, we really felt like there was a simpler version of life.
What does Cody do?
He works in healthcare tech. So it's a very different world. But he's remote.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. He's based in San Francisco. At least his company's based in San Francisco. So that's a really easy jump from Santa Barbara.
That makes more sense now. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of that worked out really well. But yeah, it just was like everything in LA, there was a point where it just felt like everything's a fucking battle. I didn't want my kids, and I didn't want to live in my car.
Like, I felt that about New York, that it was so hard to get somewhere.
Yeah, you just
it was like
A to B is tough.
And when I got to LA, it was like that.
Yeah.
And now I understand what you mean, especially post fires and all of this stuff. You have 2 kids.
Yeah.
August and Bo.
Yeah.
And do you let them watch horror movies?
Hell no. Okay, wait. I should take that back.
That's so interesting. So you're not a cool dad, in other words.
No, I'm figuring out what the gateway stuff is.
The gateway drug.
So they have seen stuff.
When we come back, we're going to talk to you about your filmmaking style and all of your incredible success you've had. We'll be back in a moment. This March, during Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, we honor the strength of those living with MS, a disease that can take away mobility, independence, and dignity. For me, this battle is personal. I founded the Rhoda Goetz Foundation in honor of my mother, whose battle with MS inspired me to help others facing the same struggles. The foundation provides in-home care and emergency chore service for those in need, because no one should face this journey alone. Visit rhodagoetzfoundation.org to donate or to learn more. Together we can bring care, comfort, and hope to those who need it most. We're back with Chris Landon. And Chris, I want to ask you about your first break post fleeing LA to Texas.
Right.
You wanted to be maybe a realtor, right?
Yeah, I was just starting to study to get my real estate license.
Nix that idea. You come back and you stumble into a hit called Disturbia.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Disturbia was an idea that I had.
Oh, it came from your head?
Yeah.
That was a good movie. That was a big hit.
It was a big hit.
And it really was about that next door neighbor thing, right?
Absolutely. It's no surprise and no secret that I am a huge Hitchcock fan. Love Rear Window.
For those of you who haven't seen Rear Window, and I can
shame
only
on
imagine,
you.
shame
That's all I
on
have
you,
to say.
and run to see it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Grace Kelly just crawling up on that fire escape or whatever. Oh my God.
So good.
I think
and
she had
so romantic too.
Yeah, but she had like a dress or a skirt on.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, could anyone be sexier?
She was
My God.
Gorgeous and amazing. So I was heading to a meeting. I was on the 134, stuck in traffic, and I was listening to, they were talking about Martha Stewart on house arrest. And that's where the idea came from. I was like, if I were on house arrest, what would I do? Would I just be fucking going out of my mind? And just one idea led to the next. And then I thought, oh, what if it's a kid?
Did you go home and write that night?
I did. I wrote it down right away. And then I banged out a draft pretty quickly. And then I set the project up at Ivan Reitman's company. And my dear friend, Jackie Schaefer, was instrumental in that happening. She was at the time working with Ivan and Tom.
That's Ivan Reitman, may he rest in peace, and Tom Pollock, also may he rest in peace.
Ivan was the best.
The best.
So anyway, it all happened really fast, and then the movie got made, and it was...
So I knew it was Ivan's company that did it.
Yeah.
Who directed it?
It was DJ Caruso.
Oh my God, I love that guy.
Yeah.
Do you know, I met DJ when he was, I believe, an assistant to John Badham.
Wow.
That many years ago.
That's crazy.
He had a wonderful career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you caught that cool essence in that movie. Did it lead to your directorial debut?
No, the directorial debut was a
later.
whole random side thing and a fluke. I actually did not have great aspirations to direct. I really always thought I was just going to be a writer, and that's where I was going to stay. It was a lane I was happy in, because also I'm a bit of an introvert.
Which is really hard for me to digest, because when you see me, we're so gregarious together.
Yeah, I think I have
when you're comfortable with someone.
When I'm comfortable and I'm in a setting that's comfortable to me, and that's why when I see you, it's like, oh, thank God. I have someone in my corner. So I just thought, no, that's not for me, and I'm just going to keep writing. And a friend of mine, this guy, Oren Siegel, I had written this really weird script, very bizarre script that kind of sort of came out of me. It was like bile. I had a lot of like weird, angry, angsty bullshit in me. And I was like, I'm going to write my angry, young, angsty bullshit movie. And so I did. And it kind of got passed around.
Wasn't horror movie, was
No,
it?
not at all. It was an anthology. It was like a...
You understand why I'm asking?
Yeah. No, it was just like a very bizarre black comedy. Dark as night.
That'd be something for Larry, maybe.
Yeah. So I get a call from Oren. He's like, hey, I've been talking to these people in Louisiana with lots of money and they want to finance a movie.
Happens.
And they said, and they love your script. And they said, you can direct it if you want. And up to that moment, outside of directing a couple short films, had all but stopped thinking about that entirely. And then suddenly I was like, well, wait a minute. These people are going to give me $5 million to direct this thing. I felt like I would be an idiot to say no. Yeah. So I was like, this is a chance. And so I made the movie. It's called Burning Palms. It's a very flawed film. I learned a shit ton.
I'm going to watch the movie now.
Yes, and you will be shocked and horrified. And also, like, it's weird now because I've seen it since, because my husband wanted to watch it. And I felt like I was watching somebody else's work in a strange way, because all those feelings are gone.
Wow.
And so it was really surreal to watch it. But I also got to work with Zoe Saldana. She was in it.
Oh, man.
Rosamund Pike.
Oh, no.
I had a stacked cast. And luckily, Zoe lives in my town and we still get to see each other all the time. Yeah, she's amazing.
My God, what a performance.
She's incredible. And she's a genuinely good person.
My friend Robbie Brenner, also a guest on this podcast, she is very close with Zoe, and I hear just the greatest things about her. Yeah, just the greatest.
She's a good
person.
So
Zoe and Rosamund Pike is
and they were,
what an actress.
They're both incredible in the movie. They're better than the direction they got.
But
I was learning a lot. And that was the thing. Absolutely. It was a trial by fire for me. And so that was what really...
That was your directorial debut.
It was.
But between Disturbia and that,
yeah,
you had written several things? Because now you were
Yes,
back.
I had written some stuff, but only one other movie that got made. It's funny. Everything really happened for me after... And again, it was another accidental thing.
Which one?
Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity
what
was...
number did you do?
I did 2, 3, 4, the spinoff, and then another sort of weird spinoff after that.
Jason Blum and I worked on the very first one together.
Yeah.
And all of the other subsequent ones.
Yeah. I was with Jason the night he saw the original...
Slam Dance?
First. No, because that was Steven Schneider.
Didn't Jason see it there?
Jason saw it at home, at his house. And he called me up because he and I had started to sort of become friendly.
I was just going to ask you, how did you start with Jason?
And he knew that I was a diehard horror fan. So he called me up and he was like, buddy, you know, you got to come over. So I came over and it was Jason and I, and we watched the movie. And I think Steven was there. I can't remember. And the movie ended, and I just
remember it didn't have that ending.
No,
at first.
different ending. But
that was because of Steven Spielberg.
Yeah,
in large measure.
Yeah,
and Stacy Snyder.
Absolutely. But I had it like got into my stomach.
It was so good, wasn't it?
And I was like, holy shit. I don't know. I remember looking at Jason and I said, I don't know what your involvement in this thing will be, but you need to get in it because it's fucking amazing. And then I was shocked and horrified when I heard that they were planning to just remake it.
They bought it to remake it.
Which was crazy.
They spent like, I want $400,000 or something like that to buy it with the intent to remake it, not to distribute it.
Yeah.
And of course, they went in and Jason asked for the screening. Yeah. We did the screening. The numbers were quite good.
Yeah.
But there was something at the end that wasn't altogether that sort of punctuation mark that was needed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Steven, I guess, saw it, as well as Stacy, and they added that incredible ending.
Yeah.
And that boosted it. So we just screened it again. And man, all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
And
I was there for that first moment. But the funny thing was, I had nothing to do with the first movie. And then I got a call from Ashley Brooks, who runs Screen Gems now, and Adam Goodman.
She was at Paramount.
And she was my executive on Disturbia. And again, she was like, Chris loves horror movies. So they called me up and they said, we're going to do a round table with a bunch of writers because we've started to shoot the sequel and we're having problems. They had shut production down after about, I think, 8 days. Paranormal 2. And so they gave us like a document. They didn't have a script. They just had like, I don't know what it was. I guess just like a little sort of beat sheet thing. Yeah. And so I read it and then I watched an assembly of what they had shot. And then I sat there at this round table with all these other like big writers and I just kind of felt out of place. And again, that social sort of awkwardness for me kind of came in. So I sat there with my arms folded and then everybody was very like, it's great. Yeah, this is great. It's going to be great. And I just kept my head down. And then finally Adam Goodman looked at me and goes, Chris, why are you scowling? And I don't know why I said it, but I looked up and I said, because I think you're in trouble.
I love that. Renegade, baby.
And he looked at me. I go, it's not scary. Where are the scares? Where are the set pieces? Like, where's this thing going? Like, where's the mythology? And in that moment, I pitched him a sequence that's in the sequel. There's this moment where Christy, the mom, gets ripped out of the nursery and dragged down the stairs and pulled into a basement. And so everyone kind of got quiet, and then the meeting ended, and Adam walked over to me and he said, will you go home and write that scene? And I said, sure. So I did.
Oh, good man, Adam.
Yeah. And that was the beginning of my involvement in it.
Two great executives, by the way, Adam and Ashley.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
But you didn't hold back. And
no.
Look how that another great lesson for young folks listening to this, you know, if you want a seat at the table, lean in and say what you need to say.
Yeah, say what's on your mind.
Exactly. But say it in an honest way.
Yeah.
If you're just saying it to be heard, that's not good.
Right. And I've been in those rooms too, where you hear that kind of stuff. And it's like,
yeah, please. We don't need yet another opinion.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, well, by the way, in Disturbia, did that give you enough money to come back to LA to say, is that what happened there?
Yeah. I remember, it's funny, I was paid like, I don't know, scale.
Did you get any gross points?
I was not, no. I didn't get any of that. By the way, I could tell you some really funny stories about all of this, but residuals. That was a different story because this was like...
Oh, you were WGA then?
I was WGA.
Is that your first job? Or was it the first one back when you were 19?
Yeah, that I joined the WGA back then. But I had never gotten residuals before.
What's the first check you got? How much was it?
It was big.
Like what?
I mean, I feel like I opened the check and it was like a $250,000 check.
Wow.
And I remember I stared at it. I was standing at my mailbox outside my place, staring for the longest time
because I had to your knees.
I had to keep rereading it, and then I remember jumping up and down my block, going back and forth, just jumping up and down. And my neighbors must have thought I was fucking crazy.
When I was an actor, I did the West Coast premiere of Biloxi Blues, and I worked with an actor who was in Karate Kid, the original Karate Kid.
Yeah,
and he was broke at that point in his life. After Karate Kid, he could not get a job and he ran out of money. Yeah. Couldn't pay his rent. Mail comes. $27,000 check.
Yeah.
I remember he said he fell to his knees. As an actor doing a lot of commercials, I'd get residual checks, But man, I would call my manager every other day and say, did the check come in yet? So I kind of knew what I was getting. Yeah. But I'd love a moment like that
oh
of
my God.
opening a check for $250,000.
I couldn't fucking believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, it blew my mind.
And it enabled you to stay in the game.
I could just keep going. And here's an interesting thing, because this has been a misconception that I have faced for the better part of my life, which was people have always looked at me and said, you had a famous father, you had a rich father, so you were always okay. And what people don't know, this is probably the first time I've ever even told anybody this, but like when my dad passed away, I guess it was probably just a month before he passed away, he changed his will.
Oh boy.
That was his decision to make. But this idea that like I was sitting on some giant pile of inherited money is false.
But even if he hadn't changed his will, the truth of the matter is people think that particularly actors are far richer than they actually are because now your father worked for years and years and so forth, but unless they invested in real estate and other things,
right,
they will work for hires.
Yeah.
And in the early days, they didn't have residuals the way they have now. So I have very successful friends who have done quite well, but they have to watch their finances. It's just the fact. So I appreciate you sharing that. And also, you are a self-made man. You clearly are your parents' kid, and particularly your dad's in many ways, probably from the talent that was passed on to you. But you found your own way.
Right.
So now you're back in LA. We've got you back, thank God. And how do you find your way to Happy Death Day? Because that was really another turning point for you. Now, already you were involved with Jason Blum and Blumhouse.
Yeah. So we had done all the paranormals together. After I finished working on that franchise, I made another Paramount movie called The Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse.
That was wild. That was along like the Cabin Fever vein.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's when you started playing with comedy in your horror.
Yes. It was the first horror comedy that I had made, but the movie bombed.
Why did it bomb?
Well, to be honest, I think it was two factors. One, I think that people had sort of reached zombie saturation.
Fatigue.
Yeah, I think the fatigue had settled. But also, and this was way before COVID, Paramount had decided to test shortening the theatrical window. And they used my movie as the guinea pig. So they went, to all the theater chains, and every single one of them said, go fuck yourself, no, except AMC. And so the movie only went to AMC. By that point, the marketing budget just imploded. And so the movie never really had a fair shake or a chance. And then I kind of found myself in director jail because it was very pronounced in terms of my phone stopped ringing. No one was interested in hiring me.
It really happens.
Yeah, it does happen. And the crazy thing was, years before that, I had been hired to rewrite a script called Half to Death. And I remember I was writing for another director. It was like a music video director. And then the movie didn't get made. It was a bummer because I was really proud of that script because it was a really fun script. And so anyways, after I'm in director's jail, after Scouts, and one of the producers, Angela Mancuso, calls me. We had lunch and she brought it up. And she said, it's such a shame that we never got to do Half to Death. And then I said, well, what's going on with it? And she said her other producing partner, they were no longer partners at the time, but they were a long time ago. I guess they were about to turn it into a YouTube series. I don't know. It was really strange and it sounded super small. And I said, could we stop that somehow? Because they were about to do it. I was like,
that was like what Jason did, by the way, with the home video sale of Paranormal Activity.
Oh, that's so crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
He stopped that. It was going to go to Stars or something.
Yeah, it was just something weird like that. And so I just said, please pause that. And I went and I dug up the script and I read it and I was like, this is so fun. I can't believe we didn't make this. So I sent it to Jason and I said, just read this. And it was like on a Friday. And he called me on a Monday and said, this is greenlit.
Wow.
This is greenlit. He had already shared it with the studio.
What was the budget at that point?
$5 million.
Mm-hmm. So which is what they were playing in.
Yeah. So we
made 5 or under.
Yeah, we made it for 5. And
Universal distributed. And I remember opening weekend, we opened to 26 million, I think it was, and went on to gross like 100 and I forget what it was, 150 on a $5 million budget. And that was definitely a massive turning point. Did they immediately greenlight part 2?
Yes. Yeah.
Like that weekend?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
or even before.
And I had already started working on that one.
As soon as you see tracking.
Yeah. We knew, but I wasn't counting my chickens, and I knew what I wanted to make.
So you already started working on it, huh?
I had the idea for the sequel when I was in post. And so I kind of kept it to myself, but then I started to share it as the momentum started building on the movie. And so by the time the movie came out and was successful, it was full steam ahead.
Wow. And that was your next movie?
And that was my next movie. Yep.
How long did it take you to write it before you shot it?
I don't know, 4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, I wrote it fast.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was really fast. Yeah, and then we were moving.
How did Hard Eyes get made? Because that was, to me, another, as I said earlier, like a really sort of unique twist on the comedy added to the horror. And I thought it had just a fun quality to it.
So I was working with Spyglass because I was supposed to direct Scream 7. And so while I was in just sort of dealing with them on that movie, one of the executives there, Chris Stone, brought me a project they had called Hard Eyes. He gave me the script, and it was, about a serial killer who murders couples. And I thought, like, that's fun. But I saw this opportunity to, as I pitched it back to him, I was like, this could be like the most scary and violent rom-com ever made. And I loved that idea because I also, apart from having a love of horror, have grown up with sisters and have grown up watching rom-coms. And have both an appreciation and also like I hate them at the same time.
You like really were right on that fine line of...
Yeah.
Because that worked. That romance actually worked.
It works really well. And this is a thing that I like to do. And by the way, for the record, Josh Rubin directed that movie. I wrote and produced, but did not direct. And he directed the shit out of that thing.
What did Josh do before?
He did Werewolves Within, Scare Me. He's great.
Did you find him?
My writing partner and I did, yeah.
Got it. And who's your writing partner? We have to
Michael Kennedy.
Got it.
Yeah, Michael Kennedy and I wrote Freaky together, and we wrote Hard Eyes together. So that was the goal, to unpack all the tropes of a horror film, of a slasher film, but also a rom-com. But going back to what you said, and I try to do this in everything that I do, which is it's fine to sort of exist in these very heightened mashup kinds of movies, but I always try to ground the characters, at least the central character.
Listen, if you don't care about characters,
exactly,
period, full stop,
yeah,
you have a very limited picture.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything that you can tell me that would change that. In other words, I don't think there's an example you can give me that's going to change that alchemy.
Yeah. It's funny. I was listening to your Elizabeth Gabler episode on the way here, and you said, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage.
Well, she said it.
Or did she say it?
And I said,
and you said you're stealing it. That's what it was.
Yeah.
But that's the truth. She's right.
It is such...
And it's just, and it seems like dumb obvious, but it's not.
It's completely the truth.
And so, yeah,
totally.
And so when I was working on the script, that was sort of a drum I kept banging, which was these two people, their love story, while we're poking fun at rom-coms, this love story still has to be genuine. It has to be real or this won't work.
Totally.
It can't be cynical. And that's what I try to keep out of my stuff. It's like I poke fun at a lot of shit because I think the world is funny. But I also think that you still have to approach it with affection.
What's the greatest lesson you learned from a test screening, an audience? Something that come to mind?
Yeah, there's two. One is they are wildly intelligent. And I think much smarter than a lot of people give audiences credit for because they have all grown up with movies. They've all developed a cinematic language. And so they understand things better than I think a lot of people think. They have a shorthand. And so that's one thing. And also, and I learned this on Happy Death Day, and you were there, don't betray them.
Don't betray the rules.
Don't betray the rules.
You set up rules,
yeah.
You stick with those rules.
Yeah.
I say it all the time. It's actually a very important lesson for filmmakers. The audience will turn on you. You can go as outrageous as you want, by the way.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. But if you, in the third act, decide to change something, suddenly your superhero who has superhuman powers can walk through walls,
right,
and hadn't had the ability to do that earlier, you're betraying the rules. This kind of harkens back to my introduction to you today, which was about criticism. I think you've grown as a man, as a professional, to embrace that if someone is commenting on something, it doesn't mean they don't like it.
Right.
In fact, they may like it a lot, but they may feel betrayed by it. You have learned to listen to criticism in a different way, haven't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very young mistake to not take criticism or to not be able to really hear it and not take it personally. And by the way, like, I still sit through your focus groups sitting on my hands because sometimes I want to strangle people.
Well, I think most recently I or someone member of the focus group got a finger. The bird.
The bird. Yeah, because sometimes you're just like, oh, come on, man. It was right there.
I'm looking at you going, because I always have my eye on like you all sitting behind 6 rows behind the focus group. I'm watching Chris, I'm watching Jason, I'm watching Cooper, I'm watching whoever it may be, the studio, and trying to take some cues.
Yeah.
Because it's a dance. And I'm always sensitive to know, because sometimes someone will say the stupidest thing and you're like, oh, please.
Sometimes you'll call them out, which is my favorite thing. But no,
I know. That's when you laugh. I see you laughing.
It's so good. And that goes across the board. Like, it's taken some time for me to also learn how to, like, getting studio notes. Like, don't be reactive. You're all on the same team. And more often than not, in some way or another, they're right.
What's the dumbest note you ever got?
Oh, God.
You got to have one that's just like, are you kidding me?
I've gotten one that was like, do they have to be gay?
Oh, sure.
That one pisses me off.
Yeah.
And I think it's stupid.
And what was your response?
No.
They don't have to be?
No, the answer is no, I'm not changing.
Oh, got it.
No, they don't have to be gay. I rolled right over. No, I mean, that's the one thing that still pisses me off more than anything is that how much homophobia I still encounter in this business.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it really fucking pisses me.
Because I think there's a perception still that the general public has some kind of reticence, and you and I both know, because we've tested movies around the country.
Right.
It's evolved completely. I mean, it's
not
really
even
changed.
The same world.
Before we break, and I could stay all afternoon speaking with you, Chris, I'd like to ask you about Drop. Yeah. It's coming out soon.
Yep. Drops April 11th.
Tell us about it.
I call it my grown-up movie. It's very modern day Hitchcock. It's about a single mother who's sort of stepping back out into the world for the first time, goes on a date, and she starts getting weird airdrops from somebody in the room, and they're kind of playful at first, and she and her date make a game of it, but then she gets one that says, check your security cameras. She goes on her phone, and she finds that there's a gunman in her house holding her son hostage, and
That is such a shitty pitch, because it is so much more exciting than that. It is an edge of your seat. High-octane thriller. I'm not kidding. It is. It is so
I'm not
crazy.
A good pitcher.
No, I'm being funny.
I've never sold a pitch.
Now, and you got a great cast. By the way, your lead, she's phenomenal.
Yeah, Megan Fahey.
Woo!
She's amazing. And she's going to blow minds.
Yeah. And then there's her son, who is Jacob Robinson.
Yeah.
You shot this in Ireland,
yep.
Correct?
We shot the movie in Dublin.
And Jacob did a really good job. And he's a TikTok star.
He is. He's Irish.
Jacob is very, very good in the movie. And so is the gal that plays her sister.
Yeah. Violet Bean.
Ooh.
She's great. She's amazing. Brandon Sklenar is amazing.
He's
on fire right now.
How did you see him in that 1923?
Yeah.
I saw him on screen and I was like, who is this guy?
And that was a big part of the draw.
And he's so charming.
He's obnoxiously handsome. I wanted this date to be a sort of like fairy tale, like wish fulfillment kind of thing where it's like, that's the guy.
Exactly.
Like,
And plus, what you did so deftly in the movie is that all the people in the restaurant you're thinking are suspects.
Yeah.
So you had to cast this thing really well.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah. And
I figured you did.
It's very specific, and even background people, you want to cast suspicion on. So like everyone was very
that's what I'm talking
about.
Yeah,
it was every single person in that room was handpicked. And yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to get that right, but it was a blast making it.
Wow. I'm hoping beyond hope that it's a big success. Last question is, what's the biggest mistake you ever made, and what did you learn from that?
I think the biggest one, in the most base way, which isn't anything specific, it's just being dishonest, I think is the worst thing.
That you had been dishonest.
Yeah.
And the thing you learned is there was not a good payoff.
No, never.
Never.
No, you can't. That's a dead end.
And I'm sure you teach it to your kids.
I try.
They good guys?
They're great. They're amazing kids.
Chris Landon, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me and to us. And this has been an absolute treat. And I hope that I see you at the next one.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. To our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our interview today. I encourage you to see Hard Eyes and the upcoming film Drop. For more filmmaking and audience testing stories, I invite you to check out my book, Audienceology, at Amazon or through my website at kevingoetz360.com. You can also follow me on my social media. Next time on Don't Kill the Messenger, I'll welcome veteran agent, producer, and legendary studio executive Mike Medavoy. Until then, I'm Kevin Goetz, and to you, our listeners, I appreciate you being part of the movie-making process. Your opinions matter.